Sure, to welcome our main speaker, Bill, all the way from Santa Barbara. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Bill. I'm an alcoholic. Another Bill. I think I'm at 4 tonight. It's really great to be here. I've heard a lot about your guys' meeting, and you are definitely not a glum lot. I've been, welcomed, and I've laughed already, and I would like to stick with your new plan about a 1-hour meeting, so I'll be done in 15 minutes. Whatever AA says to do, I do. So I'd like to thank Scott for inviting me to speak tonight. Scott has heard me speak before, so it is all his fault. So I take no blame or responsibility. It's on him. Kathy, thank you for kicking us off. You did amazing. And that was her first time. So awesome. I mean, we can just go home now. I'd like to welcome the newcomers. I caught a couple of names: Tori, Steve, Derek. And if I am your first AA speaker, I am so sorry. Please come back. I know for a fact, I used to be the secretary of the Way of Life meeting up in Santa Barbara, and I still find speakers for them. And Scott and I have traded names and speakers. And this meeting gets incredible speakers, circuit speakers, international speakers, just amazing, amazing speakers. So please, no matter what I say, don't go running, screaming out the door. Just come back. Just keep coming back, because eventually you'll hear someone great. For the rest of you, this is going to be painful, not for me, but for you. It's 45 minutes of your lives you're never getting back. And I'm not going to say I'm sorry, because I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous, actually one of the biggest gifts I've been given in Alcoholics Anonymous is learning how to give a heartfelt amends instead of saying, I'm sorry all the time. After the meeting, if you come up to me, you don't need to say thank you. I'll make an amends to you. Maybe I can come mow your lawn. I can walk your dogs. I can listen to your life story for 45 minutes and pretend not to be bored out of my mind. I will do that, So thank you again for having me. So I drank for 30 years. And I think I was able to do that because I felt that I did not have any consequences. I never had any consequences with the law. I never had I didn't feel like I lost anything. I never lost a job. I didn't feel like I was losing friends or losing family. The friends that I did lose, the relationships that I did lose was all their fault. So good riddance, I was done. And so I didn't really maybe believe that I was an alcoholic. I thought maybe I was a heavy drinker or that I was a binge drinker. I didn't really think it was that abnormal that towards the last 15 years of my drinking that I would end up in psych wards or rehabs or detoxes. I just kind of thought that was just it would happen, and then I would get better, and I would just leave, and I would think I was cured, and I would just go on for a while. I'd never do AA. I'd never get a sponsor. I never opened the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I got my first copy of the Big Book in a rehab, and I never opened it for 15 years. Literally never opened it, but I kept it, which was weird. And I finally opened it at my last rehab and started to actually read the book. So I was born and raised in San Francisco. My childhood, I had incredible parents, super loving, supportive. They did everything they thought was right for me. I had a great sister, and up until I was 6 or 7 years old, I really loved my life. I just had fun, and I enjoyed school, and I enjoyed all the kids, and I just thought I was a normal kid. And around that time, people started asking me questions like, Billy, why don't you like other little boys? And Billy, why don't you do this? And Billy, what's wrong with you? And I was just not really kind of sure what was going on. And so my parents one night came home. My dad came home from work, and they said, and a babysitter showed up, and I was like, that's kind of weird. And I didn't know my parents were going out. And they were like, no, the babysitter's for your sister. We're going to the doctor's. And I'm like, going to the doctor's at 7 o'clock at night? So we drive into San Francisco, and there's this place called, if you're familiar with San Francisco, it's called Forest Hill Station. It's kind of for San Francisco, it's a secluded kind of place. There's lots of big eucalyptus trees, and I just remember this vividly. And we're driving up this long driveway to this hospital, and that I'd never been before. That wasn't where my doctor was. And this place was called Lang Reporter, and what I didn't know at the time is that it was a mental health facility. And so we get there, and we meet with this doctor. He was a really sweet man. I still remember him vividly, Dr. Sansom. And he took me into this room. And this room was incredible. It was like I had died and gone to heaven. It had every toy imaginable. And let me back up a little, just to relate to why I think I ended up there. One of the situations that happened is my sister and I had been playing in her room, and I brought my G.I. Joes down, and we were playing with G.I. Joes, and she was playing with her Barbies. I'm kind of looking at the Barbies going, they look like kind of more fun than the G.I. Joes. They've got like different outfits, and they've got boobs, and they were just kind of more interesting to me than the G.I. Joes. And so I'm playing with the Barbie dolls, and my mom comes in and literally just I've never seen my mom that angry. She like yanks me up. She tells my sister, don't you ever let your brother play with those Barbie dolls. And she's like, Billy, never touch those Barbie dolls again. And she was just livid, and I didn't know why she was so angry. And I just remember going up to my room and just sobbing and just not understanding, why she was so angry. So anyway, so we end up at this hospital, and like I said, this room was incredible. I go in with the doctor, and he's like, just play with anything you want to play with. And I'm like, great. And so I'm looking around, and there's like everything you want, anything a kid would want to play with. And there's this great big, at the end of the room, Victorian dollhouse. And I'm like, So I go up to this dollhouse, and you can open it up. I look in, and I'm like, man, this place needs to be redecorated. And so I go to town redecorating and playing with this dollhouse and whatever, and I'm having a ball. And and the doctor's just sitting there just taking notes, And and there's also in the back of the room this big mirror. And I didn't know at the time until my mom told me years later is that it was a two-way mirror, or a one-way mirror, right? Or two-way mirror. And my parents were watching. So I get out of that room, and we get back in the car, and we're going home, and my mom is like, softly crying, and my dad's looking very stern, and I was just like, I did something wrong. I just knew in my gut I did something wrong, and I didn't know what it was. We kept going back to that doctor for a while, and so I'd go back into the room, and I usually chose what we would, label as girls' toys. And the doctor said, he goes, well, why don't we play with the Tonka trucks? And I'm like, okay. Totally boring. And then there's this big sandbox. There was a sandbox, indoor sandbox in the middle of this room. And so he goes, well, you can play with the blocks. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like building this castle, and this castle is amazing, and the princess is going to live in the castle. And putting all that. And he's like, well, why don't we put the army men in the castle? And why don't we put the tanks in the castle? And I'm like, why would we do that? But, it's like, so what was happening was, which most of you have figured out, is that back then it was a subtle way of conversion to get me more masculine. So in school, I also started to notice, that kids that were different would get bullied. I didn't want to be bullied, and I didn't want to be noticed, because I was about a foot taller than all of my classmates. And I already felt super awkward. I mean, my dad was UDT commander, Frogman, which was the precursor for the Navy SEALs, and he was just handsome and looked like a movie star, and my mother was beautiful, and she looked like a movie star. My sister was cute as a button, and I just felt like I looked like this praying mantis. That's what I thought, and I just felt awkward and weird. And so I just didn't want to be noticed. And so we're going back to the clinic, And I'm starting to figure it out, and I start to play with the boys' toys. And I noticed when we would go home that my mom and my dad would be super happy, and they'd be chatty, and we'd go get ice cream, and everything was great. And I thought, okay, I figured it out. And so at that moment, I started to become an imposter. I started to act and react how I thought people wanted me to act and react, not the way I felt that I wanted to act and react. And that continued on until most of my adult life. So in school, I just kept a low profile. I was told I was bad at math. I was told I was bad at reading. I was told I was bad at comprehension. I was told I was bad at sports. And therefore, because adults are telling me that and other kids are telling me that, it was true. And so I believed that. So we moved from San Francisco down the peninsula when I was in 5th grade, and it was kind of maybe my first geographic without knowing it was a geographic. And I got into a new school, and I was thought it would just be more of the same. I'd be a loner. I wouldn't have any friends, or I'd just have one friend who was always another weird little kid. And so we moved down to this town called Burlingame, and went to school there, and this group of guys came up to me and said, "Oh, you're new," and they stuck out their hand and shook my hand, and they said, "Hey, come hang with us." And it was a whole new life for me. I suddenly had all these cool friends, and I was having a lot of fun, but I was acting the way they were acting, not the way I think I would have naturally acted. And as a couple of years later, I met another kid. This kid was really cool, and his parents were really like into theater and into the arts and lectures, and they traveled and all this kind of stuff, and I started hanging out with him. My other buddies didn't like him. They said he was a weird little kid, and that scared me, and they said if I was going to be friends with him, I couldn't be friends with them. And I kind of thought that was weird, but I didn't really believe that they would go through with it, but they did. And they all dropped me, and that was really painful. So then again, once again, I thought when I got into high school, I thought, no, I just got to act and react like people want me to act and react. And in high school, I ended up with another group of friends that were awesome, and I'm so grateful today that 3 of them are still my best friends. We've stayed friends for 50 years, and I didn't, and I almost destroyed those friendships with my drinking. And thanks to this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't. So high school was great, and then at 15, it happened. Went out to the golf course one night. One of my friends had stolen a bottle of scotch from his dad, and I got drunk for the first time. And it was that sense of ease and comfort, and it was fun, and we had a blast. And the next morning when I woke up, it wasn't like, oh, I got to do that again. It wasn't like that at all. But it set the tone that the next time I drank, and the next time I drank, and for the rest of my life, the rest of my drinking life, I always drank to get drunk. I never understood how you could just go and sip a cocktail. I was a gulper. I gulped everything. I wanted to get to where alcohol took me fast, so I gulped. During high school, it was fun. It was all fun, no problems. During that time too, it's like earlier, like when I was younger, I was really ill with bronchitis and pneumonia, and I had to miss a lot of school. And so my mom went to the library and got me a lot of books, and I started reading like tons of books. I was reading like Dr. Dolittle and the Hardy Boys. And when I ran out of the Hardy Boys, I started reading my sister's Nancy Drews, which I don't think they liked, but they let me do it. And my reading comprehension, it was like I never had a problem. And I don't think I ever did have a problem, but for some reason I got boxed in at some point by one teacher, telling me I didn't comprehend what I read. But I mean, by 6th, 7th grade, I was reading at high school level. High school level, I was reading at college level, and that's just the way it went. But I still, in the back of my mind, was like it wasn't good enough, right? So I get into college, had a great high school experience, get into college, and what is a kid who, doesn't want to be noticed, wants to fly under the radar, what does he major in? Theater. Yeah. And I loved theater because I could become someone else. I was no longer the weird, freaky little kid. I could become any character I wanted to. I could be anywhere I wanted to be. And I was told I was good at it. And so I thought, well, that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a famous actor. And so I went to college for that. And the first year was great. There was a lot of partying, a lot of drinking, but I always made it to class. I always did well. First year in college, I was on the dean's list. And then the second year of college, I was on the dean's list again, but not the good one. The one for academic probation. Because I just couldn't I made it to my rehearsals and that kind of stuff, but school was in the way. I just couldn't make it to classes, because I was usually pretty hungover till 12 o'clock. And also in college for the first time, I fell in love. It was unrequited, and it was just a tragedy for me. And even though this person never knew I was in love with them. So I did something for the first time. I drank alone. And I liked it, It was great. I started drinking Carlo Rossi, the big jugs. And, it took that pain away, the life away. And I also felt like I was slipping. Obviously, I was slipping academically. And also, I wasn't really getting cast in as many shows as I was when I was a freshman. And I didn't make it into an advanced acting class. And, I just thought, you know what? The problem is this school. That's the problem. I need to get out of here and really be an actor. And so, one of my first brilliant ideas was to leave school and kind of try to pursue acting. So I went down, I had a friend down in LA, so I went down to LA and I started making the rounds and auditioning, and I actually got a representative, and this representative got me some jobs, just like some independent films and commercial work. And but at that time, there was an explosion in the daytime drama soap operas. It was the era of Luke and Laura, and the shows got really big. And I ended up on that show. And I was what they call a featured extra. And unbeknownst to me is that the producer really liked, or it's like a couple of the producers really liked me, and they were thinking of maybe expanding the part. And so one weekend, a friend of mine was staying at Tom Mix's old cabin, the old Cowboy Star. And there was this big party going up there, and I started snorting my alcohol as well as drinking it. And it was just this great party that lasted days. And I kind of came to on a Tuesday, and I was supposed to be on the set of the studio on Monday. And so back then, we didn't have cell phones. We had services, so you would call your service and say, hey, did my agent call? Yeah, my agent called, and basically said that I was done, fired. Don't call. It was horrible. But you know what? I just thought, no big deal. Something else will come along. And so I struggled for a little while, and nothing came along. So mom and dad were tired of supporting me, and they said, you either need to go back to school or you need to come back home. And so I went back home, and so I kind of floated around San Francisco and tried to do some theater. I did a couple of theater jobs, and nothing really was happening. And I was just drinking a lot, and I was living with some high school friends in a apartment in the Haight-Ashbury, and it was fun, but I wasn't going anywhere. And then I met this guy in this play, and he goes, oh, you know where you can make money? And I'm like, where? And he goes, industrial films. And I'm like, industrial films? Okay, don't get excited. They weren't porno films. That was my first reaction, was like, is that porn? And industrial films, if you don't know what they are, it's corporations hire these companies to make films like training films, like, this is Bill frying French fries at McDonald's. Uh-oh, Bill put too much salt on the French fries, That was it. And it's really, it's where actors go to die. It's soul-sucking. It's just soul-sucking. I didn't know what to do with my life, and I lost the job that I had, not because of alcohol, they just laid people off. So I went back to school. I thought that was a smart thing to do, and it was. And I didn't pursue the theater anymore. I took like business classes and retail management and that kind of stuff. And so I did that for a long time. And all through this time, my mom was asking me, she goes, well, do you think you might be gay? I'm like, no, I'm not gay, Mom. And so my friends were like, well, do you think you might be gay? I'm like, no, I'm not gay. And so I was about 26 years old, and I was dating this woman, and she was a really wonderful woman. She had 2 little kids, and I really liked them. And I was like, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is time to like get married, and I'll be a stepdad, and maybe that'll help with my drinking. Because people had noticed my drinking. I mean, it was constant comments about my drinking. I was always the one who got drunk and passed out, or didn't show up, or what we do. And so I thought, this could be it. And so one night, this lady and I were talking, and she goes, Bill, have you ever thought you might be gay? And I was like, oh God. And all of a sudden something just happened to me, and I just said, yeah, I think I am. And she was like, yeah, I thought you were, And ladies, if you've ever dated a gay closeted man, we make the best boyfriends. We will go shopping with you, we'll do your hair, and we will never pressure you to have sex, ever. So, we're pretty good boyfriends. So I thought that was the key, that's why I was drinking so much, because I was been pushing that down for so many years, and so I'm gay, so I'm not an alcoholic anymore, and and that was the problem, Well, after 26 years of being an imposter and not even knowing who I was and whatever, it didn't fix the alcohol problem. It just it got worse. Like I said, I never lost a job, and I just went on. I didn't have very good relationships. The relationships I ended up with were pretty toxic. I was always finding guys that I could fix because I didn't want to look inside and see what was wrong with me. I was the one who needed to be fixed, but I thought, if I can fix you, I'll be okay. And so picking damaged people is what I did. That was kind of my MO. And then at about age 36, something happened to me that never happened before, is I couldn't stop drinking. I had started drinking one night and I couldn't stop. I literally couldn't stop. Every time I stopped, my body would just scream for alcohol, and I was in agony. And I'd never had that experience before. And so my mom came over, and she goes, what is going on with you? And I said, I can't stop. And she goes, well, you need to get help. And I was like, no, I can do this myself. And I couldn't. And she left that night, and she just looked so scared, and I just the look in her eyes just terrified me, because I thought, I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die. And I kind of had I think my first spiritual experience, because I was sitting on my couch and I was drinking, and all of a sudden a voice just said behind me, as clear as day, said, Bill, if you don't stop, you are going to die. And it's kind of freaked me out to the point where I actually looked behind me, and it was like, wow. So I went to the Yellow Pages. Kids, those were in the old days, we had this phone book. That's how you got numbers, And so I opened up this book, this phone book, and the first page I opened in the Yellow Pages says, did you have a problem with alcohol? Call Mills Peninsula. It's a treatment center up in San Francisco. And so I called Mills Peninsula, and I had an intake. I met some really, for the first time, people that were just like me. I thought I was the only person who drank at 6 in the morning. I thought I was the worst person ever, and I thought I was just a horrible, horrible person. And I met these people that had stories that just, made me look like a pussycat. And I loved it. I always got an A+ in rehab. I always did. I did exactly what they wanted me to do. I said exactly what they wanted to do because it all boiled back down to I wanted you to like me and not think I was weird. And so I went through this 30-day program, then I did like a 6-week outpatient program, and I had all these new friends, and we were having fun in sobriety, and I never opened the book, and I never got a sponsor, and I didn't get it. I mean, I'd been living so long without a solution, and here's the solution being presented to me, and I didn't take it. I just thought I was cured, and so after about 4 months, kind of the new friends, people either relapsed or they really got hardcore into it, and I felt good, and life was happening again for me, and I just thought I'm cured. I don't need to drink. But like we know, I didn't have any defense against that first drink. So the minute things started to go downhill again for me, I drank, and it was just back on. And I've been going to another rehab and another detox, and that continued on until about my early 40s. And then something happened. I got this dog, and I loved this dog. I didn't want him. I grew up with big dogs, shepherds, and Rottweilers, and he was a little white fluff dog. He was a Maltese, and he was a rescue that my boss had, and she couldn't keep him, and she said, well, can you just keep him till I get a home for him? And I said, sure. And so I took him home with me, and I fell in love with that dog the first night, and so he was my white shadow, and I took him everywhere with me. We had a family cabin up on the Russian River, which is about 75 miles northwest of San Francisco, and we go kayaking and canoeing. I had my friends up there every weekend. Life was just really good, and I always thought in the back of my mind, well, if I drink and I go on one of my binges, what's going to happen to Max? What's going to happen to my dog? So that dog was my higher power for about 7 years. For those 7 years, I wasn't sober, but I was dry. I acted the same way that I always did, but life was pretty good. I had a great job and good friends, and everybody was happy that I wasn't drinking, and the great imposter was still there. Oh yeah, I'm going to AA. Oh yeah, I'm working the steps. Oh yeah, I've got a sponsor, and I had a lot of sponsors before I really got sober, but they never knew it. They never knew that they were my sponsor. I'd like hear something Scott said at a meeting, and I'm like, oh, he's my sponsor. But when I go talk to Scott, no, never. It's not how I rolled. So. When I was about, my late 40s, I got a brilliant idea. And my brilliant idea was to buy a used bookstore up in this little vacation town where my family's cabin was, and leave the corporate world behind. Because I've been in medical devices ever since my 30s. That was kind of the career path I ended up in. And so I decided to chuck the corporate world, bought this bookstore, moved to this little tiny town. Population is during the summer it's about 8,000. During the winter it's about 700. And so you can imagine what happens in the winter. And so I opened the store, and the first year was fantastic. I was doing great. I remodeled the place. I met all the other merchants and new people, and I was respected, and people were supportive of me, and I just had a ball, and then it dawned on me, there was some event. I'd been up there about a year, and everybody was at this event, and everybody was drinking, and I just thought, I haven't had a drink in like 7 years. I'm cured. I'd probably be able to drink and enjoy my drinking. And 2 days later, and about 2 handles of vodka later, I was right back to where I'd started, and then kind of things started to go downhill with the economy, and Amazon became big, and started taking away my online book business, which supported me during the winter. And for the first time in my life, I was like financially underwater, and it was bad, and I was drinking really. It was to the point where I was drinking when I was at work. The other merchants would actually take my keys away because I would just leave the store and go across the street to the bar. I was in a really toxic relationship with another alcoholic, another one I could fix. It was really bad. And so it got to the point where I had just burned everything down. So it took me 30 years, but this disease, as we all know, is progressive. And it got to the point where I could not get up in the morning without a drink. I couldn't do it. I couldn't face the day without a drink. And so my family, once again, rescued me. My sister came up. I actually was able to sell the bookstore at a loss. Gave up the house up there. I was on the verge of losing my house in San Francisco. I couldn't afford to live in it, so I had to rent it out, and I couldn't stop drinking. And so they took me, they said, well, you're going to come down to Santa Barbara. You're going to get a job down here. You're going to go to rehab, and you've got to stop this cycle. And so came down to Santa Barbara, went to rehab again, and then went back up to my parents' house. They were living in Los Alamos, and stayed sober for about 6 months, and then started drinking again. And got to the point where my drinking got really bad. The only place I felt safe was in a closet in my bedroom at my parents' house, wrapped in quilts with my dog on my lap, drinking. It's the only place I felt safe. I was paralyzed. Couldn't open my mail. I couldn't pay my bills. I couldn't go to I would go to a job interview, and on my way there, I would beeline to the liquor store, unbeknownst to my parents, and drink. I was every mother's dream, showing up at the doorstep, 49, just pathetic. And God bless my mom and my stepdad and my sister, because they pulled me out of so many fires. And they should have. I gave up, and they never gave up on me. And then one day, it was just, I came out of a 3-day blackout, sitting on my mom's kitchen floor, telling her how rotten my childhood was, and then realizing that it wasn't, and that my parents, were really good people. And I just looked at her and I said, I don't know what to do. And she goes, let's try it again. And at this point, I was morally, physically, spiritually, financially just bankrupt, and that willingness crept in. And so when I went to my last rehab, I can't say that I was happy to be there. I had no hope, absolutely no hope. And so in this rehab, I met this woman, and she was a born-again Christian, which is not me. And then I also met this guy who was an atheist, which wasn't me. I didn't have any concept of a God. I got to church when we were young, and I liked church, and I liked God, and I liked Jesus, and it was all great. But when I was 15 and I started drinking, I stopped going to church on Sundays with my parents. And so I always kind of thought there was a God, and I didn't blame God for anything, but I had this idea in my mind that God helps those who help themselves. And I certainly was not helping myself. I was doing everything I could to destroy myself, And so I thought, why would God help me? So in this rehab, in this detox, this born-again lady and this agnostic atheist gentleman, they taught me how they prayed, And they just keep it really simple. Just keep it really simple. Just say, hey, God, thanks today for a roof over my head and another day sober. And just leave it at that. And then, eventually you can start adding to it. Thank you for my parents. God bless. Thank you, for, I'm not out on the streets. Just keep it really simple. And so that's what I did. And I started to get better, and I started to get hope again in that rehab. And so when that was done, my counselor said to me, he goes, so Bill, what's your exit strategy? And I said, my exit strategy is I'm going to go home and get a job and go to AA. And he kind of looks at my file, and he's like, yeah, you've done that a few times. Doesn't seem to really work out for you. And he goes, I've got a suggestion. I'm like, what? And he goes, sober living. And I'm like, no. That's where criminals go, and cons and ex-cons and bad people and creepy old men. And I said, I'm just not going there. And so when I got home, my bags were packed, and I was going to sober living. It was the best decision I never made. And so I went to the sober living in Santa Barbara, All-Star Recovery, and I got there, and I was sitting on the bottom bunk, and my head was in my hand, and it was like this. It was just like my life is over. I didn't realize that my life was over, the life that I'd known. Um, excuse me. I had a new life beginning, and I didn't know it at the time. And so I started to get to know these guys in the sober living, and they were just like me. They weren't any worse than I was. They weren't any better than I was. We were all just a bunch of alcoholics and addicts, trying to beat this thing. And that really inspired me. And they said, go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I had no life, and I wasn't working. So I went to 127 meetings in 90 days. Anything to get out of that sober living, So I got a sponsor, and I worked the steps for the first time. I don't think really that thoroughly, but at the time it was to the best of my ability. I didn't delve on any of my childhood stuff because I didn't think it was important. I don't think because of what happened to me as a child made me an alcoholic. Absolutely not. My sister was perfectly fine. She's a normie. We were raised in the same household, went to the same schools. It wasn't. It was just born in me. It's just I was just born an alcoholic. And so I'm at this sober living, and I start working the steps, and I start finding that there is a solution, and it started out really slowly, realizing that, I was powerless over alcohol and that my life became unmanageable. And it did. And I had, wrote down these lists, so many examples of that, and so I ended up getting a really good job in Santa Barbara, and at about 3 or 4 months out, I was like, well, I'm getting out of this place, out of this sober living. And then again, when I have these brilliant ideas I've learned from you guys is, my parents will support anything. My normal friends will support anything. They're like, yeah, right, that's great, go for it, Bill. My alcoholic friends will say, well, yeah, that's great, but have you thought of this? And have you done that? And have you done the pros and cons list? And have you done that? Whatever. And I started to learn. You guys taught me how to make good decisions. And I realized, 4 months isn't enough time for me, in this sober living. And it was still hard for me in meetings. I was really awkward and I was really shy. And then I got this roommate, and I couldn't freaking stand him. It's that guy right there. He was just like, please don't put him in my room. Please don't put him in my room. And yeah, he came up to me one day, and my other roommate went out and disappeared. He said, hey, would you mind if I moved in to your room? And that really impressed me. And it really made me realize that I got to give people grace, and now he's my best brother in sobriety, and we're just doing this thing together. So I decided to stay in the sober living, work the program. I started getting involved. I became a GSR, which I hated, but it was a 2-year commitment. It's just like one business meeting after another. It's like business meeting hell. And but my sponsor said, you did it, keep the commitment. I kept the commitment, and became an IGR, got involved, started to meet people, and it was great. But a few years in, I was going to a lot of meetings. I'd pretty much let go of my commitments because I was getting busy again. Life was happening. And a couple of years in, I just stopped listening. I just wanted to do something else. And I wasn't happy where I was living. I wasn't happy with what was going on with my life. And I just said to God, God, just don't throw one more thing at me, because if you throw one more thing at me, I need a drink. And of course, guess what God did? He threw one more thing at me, and I drank. I was a failure at relapse. I said, I'm just going to drink this fifth of vodka. Drank the fifth of vodka, didn't even get a buzz off it. Went out, got another fifth, not even a buzz. Went out and got a couple of handles. I could get drunk enough to pass out, but I never got that sense of ease and comfort. My mind would not shut up. And I felt guilty, and all my problems became more compounded, and I lasted 2 days before I asked for help. And so when I came back in with a real renewed spirit, because I don't want to live that way anymore. And it showed me, and God showed me that even if I want to, I can never get that sense of ease and comfort from alcohol again. It just doesn't work for me anymore. And I'd always struggled with the higher power thing. I always believed in God, but I wasn't really getting that connection. And so I started going back to church, And suddenly I just kind of came full circle, and I went back to the God of my childhood. It was made all the difference in the world, because I was, for the first time, really, I wasn't scared anymore. I didn't have any fear. It was like what Chris and I were talking about earlier today, earlier this evening. I found a real, like, peace. It's like, I know if I just do what I'm supposed to do today, God's going to take care of tomorrow, you know, and that's how it happened. So I got to go pretty soon. I can go over, right? Yeah. Oh, damn. So that sober living that I hated and want to get out of, I'm now the manager of. And I love it. I manage one of Scott's house. Bill and Bob manage Sober Livings. We've actually done 12-step calls together, you know, so you can say you've been 12-step by Bill and Bob. I went back to school. I'm a family counselor. I get to work every day with families of alcoholics and addicts. I get to tell them my story. I get to tell them what I put my parents through, and my sister through, and my friends through, and I get to tell them that they're not crazy. We make you crazy. It's super rewarding, and working at the houses and getting to mentor the guys. This past 2 years have been just a renaissance in my sobriety. I got to be the honor of being the secretary of the Way of Life meeting up in Santa Barbara. It just opened up just so many new avenues for me, and I'm just so grateful. You know, and it wouldn't have happened without all of you. You guys helped me find a God in my understanding, and you guys are always there for me, and for that I'm really grateful. There's this old timer, he recently passed up in Santa Barbara, Tim Wickham. And every time I would share or speak at a meeting, he'd come up to me and give me a hug, and he'd say, "Well, Bill, you're just another run-of-the-mill AA success story," and he'd walk away, you know. And that's what I wish for you if you're new. And even if you're not new, that's what I wish for all of us, is just to stick around and just be run-of-the-mill AA success stories. Thank you very much.
Let's thank Bill again. We welcome you to return next week.